Hey, Slick Talkers, thank you so much for tuning into this podcast. And I know that if you love this show, you'll also love my morning show called Good Morning Hospitality with my co-hosts Michael Golden and Brandy Canali, as we spend 30 minutes every Monday morning to dive into the industry's top latest news and trending topics. So go check it out on wherever you find your podcasts at Good Morning Hospitality. And you can live stream with us on Monday mornings on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and of course, YouTube. Now, I hope you enjoy this episode.
The lifestyle trade-off is just so tremendous. And it's something people have always known that, right? People have known that lifestyle, that quality of life is better in Barcelona or Buenos Aires than New York or San Francisco. They just haven't had a choice, right? Their job was in New York or San Francisco. And now that's not the case. So when you really step back and look at it, it's super compelling. I think by April or May, again, people will still be working remote. Travel will be much more palatable, and I think it'll become super interesting.
Welcome to Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast where we discuss all things hospitality, hotels, and business. You can find us online at slicktalkthepodcast.com and on every podcast listening platform.
This is the Vacation Rental Mastermind Series, the Operators Edition. In early 2020, I did the same series featuring the service providers in the vacation rental space. Now, after the year that we just had in 2020, I think it's time that we showcase those who have been really leading the charge and having the boots on the ground during this crazy pandemic. In this short series, we're going to focus on what makes a sustainable and profitable vacation rental management company and why it's so key to learn these tools, tactics, and of course, structures that make these companies the way they are. So sit back, grab your pen and paper, drink your coffee, and enjoy the Vacation Rental Mastermind Series, Operators Edition. All right, everybody, welcome back to Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and today's an interesting episode because I rarely get to interview some property management giants, and to have Parker from Oasis on the show is a pretty substantial, I think, moment for the Slick Talk brand. So thank you, Parker, for joining me. Welcome to the podcast.
Of course, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Vacation rental giant. I love it.
Yeah, no, we gotta highlight some of the amazing operators. You know, we've seen the popularity, right, in vacation rentals, especially in 2019. I think we were all loving the market and the economy that we were having. And then of course 2020 threw in some curveballs. And now here we are, the first couple of weeks of 2021. And, you know, we've seen a lot of people come and go. And unfortunately, you know, it's never a great time to go through a hard time in the world, and let alone our industry. So it's nice to have you on to bring some insight. I know the listeners are going to get some value from this, so that's why I'm really excited. And I'm calling you the giant that you are, right? Perfect. So Parker,
I'll take it.
Yes, my man. So tell us a little bit about you. You're an entrepreneur, and from what I gathered, you know, with our little pre-chat and going through your career, this is not your first rodeo when it comes to being an entrepreneur. And so I kind of want to hear your background and how you got to the moments that we are, you know, obviously here today.
Sure. Yeah, definitely kind of always been an entrepreneur in some form or fashion. Is definitely, you know, one of the kids that, you know, went door to door offering to rake leaves and lawns, or did the, you know, lemonade stands, baseball card trading, all of the above. And in college, I ran a student-owned food delivery business, kind of a while ago, so kind of a precursor to, you know, before DoorDash and all those guys. So that was kind of my first true entrepreneurial experience. It was great to be able to have that at the college level. I then took a bit of a I guess, diversion from entrepreneurship and worked in finance in New York City for the first year or so of my career. Got some great experience, but quickly sort of reaffirmed I preferred the entrepreneurial route. Worked in a film. Then from then on, I was in New York 7 years total. I worked in the film business. I worked at Miramax Films. I did some sort of, freelance, independent film work. I did some stuff in events. I bought and operated a Quiznos franchise in Midtown Manhattan. So really, yeah, trying to, just do different things and get experience in my 20s. And then when I was 29, I had a lot of great experience. New York's the best, but I'd only ever lived in the US. But I was an avid traveler and sort of loved international travel, loved the idea of living abroad and spending some time in another culture. So I moved to Argentina, kind of random, just, made a list of cities, liked the idea of Buenos Aires. It was about to be summer there. It was inexpensive. So made that call. And while I was down there, I originally, booked an apartment for 4 months. And while I was down there, two things happened in those 4 months. One, I really liked it, and I wanted to find a sort of justification to stay. I didn't think 4 months would be enough. And also kind of through my own experience in, that sort of expat world, trying to find a place to live, trying to make friends, figure out which gym to join, learn, find a Spanish tutor. I really kind of zeroed in on the idea of creating a business targeting that demographic, basically making it easier for people to have those kind of experiences, right? So I moved there in 2007, took sort of a first crack at the model as more of a real estate play. I raised some money from friends who had backed me on my Quiznos venture in New York City, bought kind of dilapidated but high potential properties in one neighborhood of Buenos Aires, Palermo, which is like the cool up and coming neighborhood at the time, and sort of renovated them, furnished them, and kind of created this portfolio of rental properties targeting expat, some vacation travelers, but vacation travelers slash expats. And that was going along okay. And with that kind of, again, cemented my desire to do something in that sort of hospitality travel space, to stay in Argentina, and ended up staying there for 8 years. So that's kind of how it all happened.
I was going to say, I got one question in regards to the food delivery side. Were you doing pen and paper, phone calls? What was like the setup? Obviously, you weren't doing smartphones.
It was phone calls. Yep. So we had sort of a little central call center on campus, and then we had our delivery folks in each restaurant. We serviced like 5 restaurants around campus, and there were computers. Wasn't that long ago. This was 96 to 99. Okay. And so we take calls, type them into an interface. A ticket would print out in the restaurant, and the guy would make the delivery run. So
that's incredible.
Yeah,
I was gonna say I was born in 95, so for me, like, I didn't know what a computer was until I got like way older. Obviously, just because I didn't know how to use one. But no, that's pretty cool. And so when you were in the finance world, what was I guess I'm curious on knowing the moment that solidified you're like, I'm not a worker, I'm a creator. Like, I kind of am always curious on thinking of, because I remember my moment where I was like, I can't be working for, it's not nothing against it. It's just,
it's a great career for many people, right? Yeah, it's all about what speaks to you. I went into it knowing it was more about the experience. I sort of thought I'd probably do 2 or 3 years. I only did 1. So, I had that orientation going in, but, just kind of throughout that year, just kind of had some more thoughts about what I would do if I wasn't doing that. And living in New York City, you meet so many people who are doing so many different things. I never thought about, the film business is something I had no idea what it was as a business. Right. So living in New York, say, wow, like I love movies and film, you can actually have a job in that. That's amazing. So, at a general level, just sort of, I think being in New York and being around just creative people and seeing so much opportunity. And then there was a moment at kind of the end of my first year when, in investment banking, you get utterly drilled, and you get very few days off. And finally, at the end of my first year, I had a few days off and went to Vegas with my dad come out and went with a bunch of friends. And like 36 hours into a 3-day trip, they're like, "Hey, you gotta come back, got to come back and work on something." And I was like, "Nah, like I just, I don't think so."
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So, well, okay. Now getting back to the property management side of things. So you have these properties in Argentina. They were, I'm assuming, starting out, were you guys more focused on the long-term kind of guest traveler like yourself that was there for 4 months, or were you going on the vacation rental side where it was like, weekend trips, maybe a couple of days here and there, X, Y, and
It
Z?
was a mix. I think at the start, because we were a little more oriented towards the product itself, since we bought and renovated and furnished, the first chunk of properties. This wasn't even Oasis. This is the first iteration of what I did. And it was sort of like, hey, let's put this on a few channels. And if I get through a personal contact, someone wants to stay for 6 months, great. If, you get someone for 3 days, that's fine too. So originally it was, again, more about kind of the product itself and creating kind of we spoke about like a deconstructed boutique hotel where, again, back then it was either, it's a hotel or it's a sort of standalone direct to owner rental, right? And I want to do something that sort of had the positive elements of the hotel experience, the branding, the service, the consistency, et cetera. But were apartments and houses physically, right? So it was a lot about creating that product and that service experience. Then as I sort of learned more and the vacation rental business kind of started to get some steam, I pivoted to creating Oasis as a service, not a real estate business, but as a service brand, as a a management brand. And when we did that, it was still a bit of a blend, but I would say a bit more vacation rental. And in the early days, we had some of the second and third, fourth markets that we opened. A couple were pure vacation markets. There was like in Uruguay, which borders Argentina, there was a beach place. So it was beach houses in Punta del Este. It was Buenos Aires, which did a little bit of both. It was Cartagena in Colombia. And then it was, a Sao Paulo, which is much more of a urban kind of corporate extended stay. So we did a little bit of both. And ultimately, kind of fast forwarding quite a bit, got to a point where you really had to pick one of the two, and we go into some of the ups and downs maybe later. But I got to a point a few years ago where we said you can't try to do a little bit of everything, and I thought there was a lot of supply and a lot of smart folks focused on the short-term rental space. The pure VR short-term rental space, and really began to lean in more on the extended stay and the sort of urban extended stay versus kind of leisure vacation rental orientation.
So what was, I guess, maybe the leading factor for you to decide to go that route? Because like obviously there's a lot of different brands that go into like corporate housing strictly only, no vacation rental type model where it's leisure, or the more extended stay route. But I'm guessing maybe like the one or two factors that led into that decision.
Competition one, just trying to sort of bring something to the market that I didn't think was there. And I think if you wanted to book a place for 2 nights in Boston, I think that's pretty easy to do, and probably find a pretty decent product. But if you're going to Bogota for 6 weeks or 3 months, it's a lot harder. So part of it was just kind of refocusing on how we could add the most value to the market. And then the other is from a business model perspective, and operating at a high level in the short-term rental business, it is hard. It's quite expensive. And if you're doing it, if your orientation is around high service, to do that on a high turnover, 2 nights here, 1 night there, groups of 6, that's tough to execute. So just from a pure business model perspective, I like the extended stay. It's sort of, for the same booking could be 3 nights or 60 nights, and it's about the same amount of work, but it's 20x the revenue or 15x. So those are a couple of factors. Also, I think then, in more recent days, obviously, with the whole remote work push, and it really takes me back to the beginning in terms of what was the original orientation of what we did, is about making it possible to go live in other places. I wanted to go live somewhere that wasn't New York City, and I wasn't going to go sign a 12-month lease somewhere and do a security deposit and buy furniture. So, how can we address this, audience, this market where, so many people in the world now can and should, in my opinion, live a more flexible, lifestyle, and not be tethered to one real estate, piece of real estate. So that couple of the trends that there were a couple of reasons that I pushed more towards this a few years ago, and it's really kind of been accentuated, I guess. It's been accentuated by the pandemic.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that leads in perfectly, because when we were running our luxury vacation homes, we saw the same thing where, when you have a 22,000 square foot castle and it costs you $1,500 to turn over and cleaning, a 2-night booking is not worth your time and effort versus a 12 plus night, booking. So that makes a lot more sense. And I love that you said that too, going back into the origin of where you started, because I think, I was just talking about this with somebody else the other day. We can create our core values and mission statements as companies, right? And then to see them that the core values and mission statement really tell the story of how you started, what the goals are, where you aspire to be, and then eventually throughout somewhere along the journey they kind of get lost and where they started. So it's really cool to hear that you went right back to the beginning and made that pivot, which is really smart for you, because obviously pandemic times, we saw a lot of I think April was a little bit crazier. We're coming up on almost a year, with the whole COVID-19 pandemic. And so I think from April time was probably a little bit scarier for a lot of it, almost everybody. But now here we are almost a year later, seeing that work from anywhere trend, which led in great context for you guys creating the Passport. So I guess maybe give me some thoughts and thinkings and some I guess moments that led into, obviously that's the business model you went into, but then creating the Oasis Passport. What were some, I guess, behind the scenes things that most people don't know? I saw you guys on Skift and a few other news articles, and got really excited about it because I was yes, this is something as a young, kind of single, not married, not kids, entrepreneur, that type of lifestyle is really attractive, especially when we've been cooped up for 12 months.
Yeah. I think it was, a bit of a natural, in terms of seeing the trend that everyone, began to talk about, or even before they were talking about it, maybe it became clear that, wow, just anecdotally, now that, folks don't need to go to the office every day, sort of travel hesitancy and restrictions aside, folks that are based in New York or San Francisco that are expensive and their places are small, and maybe you need public transport, which obviously during the pandemic is not good times. They were looking to go elsewhere, whether it was go stay with their parents and who live somewhere more remote, or go to Miami for 2 months. I live in Miami, and I was seeing it with my own eyes, or certainly hearing about people that wanted to do that. So you think, okay, that's a trend happening, and we have inventory around the world in very interesting cities. Some of them maybe places like London would not be, not fall into this category, because London's probably more a place people are leaving at this point, right?
Yeah.
But many of which fall into a category of a very attractive places that people would want to spend time if they could. And we'd already sort of adapted our focus and our inventory towards extended stays, right? So we don't work with primary residences. We don't work with, we don't have master leases where we've sort of we've got to generate a certain ADR to survive. We do management agreements. We work with, unoccupied sort of second homes or investment properties. So the trend was there from the demand side. We had the supply, so it was really just about a packaging sort of exercise. So I started to speak to some people about it in pretty early, probably May or June. Hey, just sort of user interviews basically, and thought there was enough there. And again, given that we already have a brand that was kind of relevant enough to the space that I was thinking about addressing. We had the supply. I knew the demand was there. It didn't take a ton of R&D, investment. It was really just the kind of the brain power and the kind of the strategy behind it, as it were. So just kind of put it together on our own based on some of those user interviews, and pushed it out there in September. What it is, to take a step back, is it is, I think of it more as a residential living concept than a travel concept. Because if you're looking to, if you've got more freedom and flexibility now, and you're just looking to travel more, you can do that renting Airbnbs on a one-off basis. There are some, Selena's come out with a subscription product. Inspirato at the higher end has a subscription product, but those are sort of travel, sort of shorter stay, one-off situations. This is really a replacement for a house or apartment. So you pay a fixed monthly fee, and you can live in any one of the currently 400 portfolio properties around 15 cities in the world. You can move between them. So no individual bookings, no security deposits, no utility bills, none of the sort of overhead that comes with a permanent residence, and none of the hassle or friction that comes with booking individual stays, all over the place, right? So it's super seamless. It's quite affordable. The entry point, depending on this, we have 3 tiers of cities, because Paris is obviously more expensive than Buenos Aires, but within a city tier, you can use any property, and the tier 1 is $1,550 a month. And that's all in utilities, Wi-Fi, professional housekeeping, fairly white glove, concierge service, because we have teams in every market. So $1,550 is an entry point, or $2,100 for a 2-bedroom. It's pretty accessible for quite an impactful product, I feel, right? So that's the idea.
I was gonna say, Seattle, a rent for a closet is $2,000 a month. So, and that's unfurnished, not including utilities, with no parking and no view.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the lifestyle trade-off is just so tremendous. And it's something people have always known that, right? People have known that lifestyle, that quality of life is better in Barcelona or Buenos Aires than New York or San Francisco. They just haven't had a choice, right? Their job was in New York or San Francisco. And now that's not the case. So when you really step back and look at it, it's super compelling. Obviously, caveat right now, tough to, the globetrotting thing it's not viable, especially for Americans, given, the travel bans on us specifically. But that's short-lived. I mean, that's luckily, that's going to sort of sort itself out, by Q2, I think. So, in the meantime, some people may be hesitant to do it, but others may not. Others may want to say, hey, what if your destinations are open? We are in a few U.S. markets: Austin, Miami, Denver. Some of the Latin markets that we're in are open. Again, people have to make their own call on their comfortability going places. So, but I think by April or May, again, people will still be working remote. Travel will be much more palatable. And I think it'll become super interesting.
I'm curious, was your the guests that you served prior to pandemic times,
Mhm.
were they already that type of demographic that was traveling and working from a
Yeah,
laptop type nomad?
pretty much. It was definitely in terms of sort of age and type of job and where they probably live full time, quite quite similar.
Hmm.
It was either folks that were already somewhat digital nomadic or employees of corporations that were being moved around by the
Yeah,
companies, McKinsey or Google or whoever, moving you around. But again, the person was the same. They may have been sent there by their company, or they may have been able to go on their own, right?
yeah,
So definitely that made it easier for me to sort of identify that target audience. And I'm pretty close to it as well. I'm 43, so I'm probably kind of at the, but I also, like, I don't have kids, right? I
hmm,
don't have pets. Like, I'm a pretty mobile,
yeah,
uh asset light kind of guy. But I'm probably at like the top end kind of age wise of the demographic, of the
hmm,
core demographic. I hope we
hmm,
have people from all ages, but I think I see the wheelhouse is really that sort of like late 20s to mid 30s, single or in a couple, probably no kids,
yeah.
and someone who can say, like, wow,
Asset
like,
light. Yeah.
I set light, let's give up my apartment, or if I own it, put a renter in there and sort of just take to the streets and
Yeah.
get out there a little bit.
Well, and now there's a couple other things I want to touch on, but the first one would be for the creation of the passport. So tell me about like that, how operations wise, so if I'm in any city and there's all these, let's say you got 30, 30 units in Austin, right? I'm not sure if that's a real number, but I'm just throwing something out there. Like,
In that range. Yep.
yeah, theoretically. So you can, what does that look like structure wise when I'm booking as a guest? If I'm in Austin and I want to, like, because you said it's not that individual, book, check out, book, check out, book, check out. How does that work from a operation standpoint for you guys in Oasis and your team?
Sure. So yeah, I mean, you are still, you obviously, we have to prepare the property for you and whatnot. So you're still letting us know. You're saying, hey, I want to, my my first day was in Austin. I've been there a
Mhm.
month. I now want to go check out Miami. So I want to head there in a week, and we say, cool. Either you've already seen it on the website, or you ask us what's available. We say these. You say, okay, I want that, and we do book it for you, but there's no
Gotcha.
transaction. You're
Yeah.
just you're just advising us, that you want to move to a different property. You can do the same thing in the city itself. By the way, say you were
Mhm.
staying in a one bedroom in Austin, you had friends or family coming to visit, you could flex up to a two bedroom, and as long as
Cool.
there's availability, you can let us know. We arrange the check in, and that's that. Um, we have we do have, again, folks on the ground in every market, so there is a little bit of a white glove concierge element to it.
Yeah.
Again, operationally, not that easier to execute, given these are extended stays, right?
Yeah.
And we've got, sort of from a facilities perspective, a lot of our properties have kind of building amenities and whatnot. But we have a partnership with a co-working space called Spaces, kind of a WeWork competitor that's all over the place. So
Mhm.
you've got sort of discounted access to co-working if you want to get out of the house a little bit. Working on some sort of fitness and wellness partnerships as well.
Yeah.
So we are trying to lean on partnerships to sort of fill out the offering.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. It's really top shelf service. Like I like to think of like if I was in Austin, I want to go to Miami, and just to be able to tell you guys, hey, like especially on the flexibility side of things, I think being a person that does just work from my laptop, I'm a pretty mobile worker. Just that ability itself is super appealing. So I think that's really incredible what you guys have built. I'm curious too. You said something about master leasing, and I'm glad you did, because I think we've seen a lot of people, when you're saying have to have a certain ADR in order to stay above. Um, that model did not quite work. A lot of people had to go to long-term leases and extend above that, so they weren't getting that turnover, whether it's extended stay or vacation booking. So for, I guess, the audience, I guess I'll ask a question: what makes a good, but not a good management company structure like that? Like, what in the beginning made you think of not doing a master lease, but instead of doing a management agreement, and kind of going about these? Like, what do you think makes that structure strong and sustainable?
Yeah, I mean, I think sustainable is the is the key. And we while we raised some money along the way, we never raised $100 million. We never raised like huge rounds. And so if you've got to be if you're fairly capital constrained, I always thought about putting the money into the service and the experience versus the property itself. What's a way to not have to invest in the property itself? That's kind of the whole point of the sharing economy, right? You're leveraging an asset that already exists, right? The property's already, in the old days, it was someone's home. It's already furnished. It's not something that you've got to go as the operator, build, furnish, etc. I think that model is definitely, it's tougher to scale on this. It's slower to scale on the supply side. It's more sustainable. It's less risky, but it's slower to scale. Hence, guys like Sander are smart guys. And I don't think it's a dumb idea to do the master lease thing. I think it's a clever idea in terms of, hey, how can we go get 50 units with one conversation instead of one, or how can we get instead of having to talk to individually owned properties or property investors, how can we go to a multifamily 400 unit building manager and have a conversation with them because they were interested in management agreements or revenue share deals. So I get why people went to the master lease model, but it still if you're really well funded and you execute it really well, and ideally pandemics don't occur, it can work for some folks. I just think it's very risky, and you've seen it fail on the corporate housing side as well. Not just in the pandemic, but prior. I mean, corporate housing invented the master lease model. That's what corporate housing companies did. They went and took leases on 10 units. They rent furniture instead of buying furniture. So it was a bit of an innovation in the sharing economy. Let's invest in the furniture to, sort of give it a better design feel. But, that's what corporate housing companies were doing 20, 30 years ago. And if you hit a period of a downturn or a period of low occupancy, you're done, right? Yeah. So, you've seen it sort of struggle in that sector. You've now seen it struggle in the short-term rental sector. I think it's tough to make it work. So I think, the sweet spot, which no one, including us, has really found. I think we're at one extreme where we're very one-off with the properties. It's individual homeowners, right? So it's very slow to scale, but it's also no risk, and that's great. And then, kind of Saunders of the world are on the other end of the spectrum, taking, long-term master leases, buying furniture, very capital intensive, is what all of us in the space are trying to figure out now, especially in the urban space, is there a way to hit that sweet spot in the middle where you're able to capture multiple units from the same operator, whether that's a developer or a multifamily property manager? Can you go capture 5, 10, 30 units in a building without taking a lease, right? Yeah. Can you do it with a condo developer? That no one's really done that yet. Can you do that in the condo space where, in a city where, maybe it's the economy is not great and your sales are slow, and you go tell the developer, hey, you've got units sitting here vacant. It's going to take you 18 months to sell 200 high-end condos in Miami. What if we took 20 or 30 and did a revenue share? We'll manage it, we'll invest in the furniture, and we'll revenue share. Would some of the multifamily apartment operators that historically insisted upon a master lease, would they be open to more of a management agreement, a revenue share. So we're poking around on that. I know a lot of others are as well. I think that's the sweet spot, and it's tough to find. I think internationally it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Multifamily isn't really how it works. Everything there is condoed, I mean, because there's no financing, and many of, talking about sort of Europe outside of London and Latin America, financing for real estate is tougher to get. So a lot of, folks sell individual units to finance developments, or they're very small buildings owned by kind of a mom and pop. You don't have these 400 unit multifamily buildings. So abroad, I think it's a slightly different calculus than it is in the US, but either way, it's the same objective. How can you scale quality supply with minimal balance sheet risk?
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And I think it's interesting to hear, because I've never been on the multifamily unit side. I've always been on the whole home rental, castles, mansions, etc. And so to get into that space, because you're right, it's hard to scale at the one-offs with investors that are, buying these properties as investment properties to eventually sell 3-5 years down the road. So it's like all this hard work, and then 3 years later or 4 years later, let's say you make enough revenue, they're gone. So it's like, yeah. And so the inventory scale and scalability is just really interesting. So it's cool to hear the other side of the I guess the fence, or the grass is always greener, right? So for me, I'm kind of curious now. Other than the work from anywhere trend, where you guys are seeing, the use of the Oasis Passport, the digital nomad lifestyle feel. Let's say post pandemic, people are traveling. There's like that revenge travel that we're all kind of expecting that people are going to do. What trend do you think would be another like key player or role play into the overall recovery, but then a long-term trend that's no longer a trend, but it's actually part of the sustainable model that property managers or management companies take on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think on the demand side, yeah, you're going to have pent up leisure demand. You're going to have the remote worker trend, and just maybe a continuation of trends that were already occurring, which is, into rentals versus hotels, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, yeah, I think it's been a little artificial, a little overblown. Now, I don't think that coming out of the pandemic, it's about all of a sudden, hotels are over, right? I think, yeah, but a major event like this is certainly it's shown. What a major event does is it shakes things up and it exposes people to a different way of doing things, right? So there are probably people that hadn't done the vacation rental thing before, hadn't done work from home, hadn't done many things, right?
Yeah.
And did it for the first time, so once that's occurred, you can't put that genie back in the bottle. So I do think, that trend that was occurring before the pandemic has accelerated. I think it will continue. So, that all of those things are very good for vacation rentals, short-term rentals. I think to kind of more on the execution side, this won't be a surprise to probably anyone who's in the space, is, just you're going to have to up your game on execution, right? I think travelers are, they're nervous, they're going to be nervous even coming back. They're going to be nervous about cleanliness. They're going to be nervous about security. They're just going to be on higher alert. So I think, people need to think hard about, the service model and just their ability to execute, at the level that folks are going to be expecting, especially at the higher end, right? A little bit different if it's a sort of more the young, backpacker, budget seeking traveler. But at the sort of higher end, certainly, as someone who's dealt with corporate travel, just there's a very, very high intensity around all of those sort of boring elements like safety and security and cleanliness, etc.
Well, I was going to say, I think quality control, that we're going to see probably like a shift in inventory, just higher end quality, like you're talking about, because it is going to require more for the traveler. Like they're going to be expecting a little bit more hotel feel where it's kind of consistent across the board, versus kind of like how, every property is different and unique.
Right.
We can't
A little
forget.
bit more of a roll the dice, and
Yeah.
if it doesn't work out, it's
Yeah.
not that big of a deal, right?
Exactly.
If you're just with the heightened focus that I mentioned on safety and quality, but then B, if you're staying somewhere longer, right?
Yeah.
Two nights, whatever, the property didn't work out, but it was a good location and it's 2 nights, right? But
100%.
I'm going somewhere for 2 months and I show up and it's, like that's not going to cut it.
Yeah, exactly. No, I agree. Well, in order to kind of wrap up this episode, I want to get your thoughts on, in the long term, let's not even focus on COVID-19 or any of the pandemic stuff. Where do you see Oasis being, and the impact it's going to play in the industry long term for travel and hospitality as a whole?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I really kind of on the back to the roots, comment. I really, think there's a great opportunity on this blending between traditional residential real estate and short-term rentals, right? And and especially, combining that with enabling a more, international and nomadic lifestyle. Like if we can, there's no reason that there shouldn't be all these different asset classes, all these different niches, right? Like, is it a vacation rental? Is it a short-term rental? Is it corporate rental? Is it an extended stay? Is it a traditional rental, right? Like, I think there's this huge space if you start to take a step back and think about people need a place to live, right? And if you're in a city, you need a nice apartment or a nice area that's furnished and has Wi-Fi and services and whatnot. Mm-hmm. That need is the same if you're there for 3 days or 3 months or a year. So I really think there's something quite interesting in that intersection of, rethinking this is where I live and then this is where I go when I travel, and really bringing them together. Definitely not saying I've cracked the code on it at all, but I think there's a ton there, and there'll be many people that attack it in various ways. Maybe residential buildings themselves. Why don't they furnish? Why don't they furnish half the units and do them for 3 months or 6 months at a time and not 12? Right? Like So I think people can come at it from that end, from the residential real estate end, and they can come at it from the other side, like we are, the vacation rental short term. There's a ton in the middle there. So I think that's interesting and exciting, and hopefully something that is a positive trend for our industry and just sort of lifestyle in general, lifestyle trend in general as we move into the next years.
Yeah, no, I agree. Coming from the hotel world, it's like, if you're renting long-term, this is the amount of money you can make a year, right? That's 12 months, and you have a set rate per month. There's a set rate that you can make, but then having, like you said, like kind of like a hybrid maybe, where these ones are producing a lot of revenue on a high functionality type setting versus these ones are no matter what going to maximum make this. And this one, who knows? And it's kind of a cool thing to play with. So I think that's pretty cool, pretty incredible. But I just want to say thank you for, being on the podcast. You've given a lot of detailed thought and inside scoop. It's really cool for me as a podcaster to read an article on Skift about a company such as Oasis, which is what I did when I first heard about you guys. And then to see you guys at the ROR event, where you were talking with Leo from Guardhog, and then flourishing into where we are today. So I just want to say I appreciate your time and what you guys are contributing to the industry, and that you guys are continuing to innovate for the greater good. It's pretty incredible. So thank you again for being on the show and dropping some nuggets onto the podcast and to the audience.
Awesome. Thanks, Will. Pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening. We love your support and want to provide the best we can to all our listeners. So please find us online, social media, and on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Google Podcast.
What's up, everybody? If you've gotten this far into the episode of Slick Talk, the Hospitality Podcast, then you are amazing, and thank you so much for tuning in. We want to send you two places really quickly. If you can, check out the show notes and click the hospitality.fm link. Check out all of our other shows on the podcast network. And don't forget, if you have someone that you want to hear on the podcast, then fill out the guest fill out form so that way we can get them on the show. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy another episode of Slick Talk, the Hospitality Podcast.